I've got this book here with me, and it's absolutely amazing. Many popular errors in English language that writers commit in various ways. Now, this book, Pop Errors in English, Writers Beware, discusses the principles and the rules commonly violated and suggests ways to avoid such errors. Now, Segun Omoláyọ̀ is the author of this book, and he is a United Nations trained and groomed writer and editor. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, sir.
Thank you very much.
Now, I looked through this book. It's amazing. Most of the books that we have about errors in English language are for students or people trying to write an exam. But here we have a book targeted at journalists and writers and people in the professional field. Why did you decide that we needed this kind of a book?
Well, this came out of my experience over the past 20 years, let me say. For this period, I have been editing for university lecturers, editing for students. In broadcasting also, I did a lot of editing. And all my years in the United Nations, editing was what I did every day. So I was able to, through this experience, see the problems writers have, all writers, including myself. And these are what I articulated in this piece, because I saw a very serious problem.
Right.
In all sectors, either in academics, in journalism, in broadcasting, and in the United Nations. So
one of the things that I'm not sure how much time we have to discuss all the details.
Right.
But you began talking about redundancies, and some of the things that you would just assume people would find natural, that this is normal. Maybe in writing something as simple as a letter, you pointed out some errors and some things that can be done away with for easier reading. So it wasn't even just about the errors themselves. For some of them, it was just to make it easier to read, and so you don't lose your readers. Now, some of the things, for instance, you talked about tautology, verbosity, something called circumlocution. Now, there's an example here for circumlocution where you talked about, you highlighted a few examples. And here you said, agree with the idea. You can just say agree with, instead of then putting with the idea there. There's something else, during the time that, you can just say when.
Yes.
And then in view of the fact that, you can just say because. And then within the framework of, you can say in. And then within the context of, you can say regarding. So things like that. So this is stuff that you would read in the newspaper every morning, or on a website, even with letters and government letters and all of that. But there are things that you can do away with and just put simpler words.
Yes, my concern with this is because this is the greatest problem writers have, what I describe as redundancy. Loading your writing with so many things that are not required. All of those examples you highlighted are examples of things you can do without. You do without them, it does nothing to your meaning. Your meaning stays intact and the message is still intact. But it is the most serious problem. And why is it the most serious problem with writers? The reason is there are so many sources of redundancies.
Yes.
Easily, we slip into it. You mentioned tautology, you mentioned circumlocution, prepositional phrases, verbosity, even bombast.
Yeah, I already talk about bombast.
Bombast,
I love bombast because it's what politicians use to bamboozle you when you're watching them on TV.
Right.
And they don't want to answer your question. And then they just use these high-sounding words that doesn't make it... So at the end of the day, you're not really sure what the man has said.
High-sounding words, that is empty. That is not saying much. We call them say-nothing statements. Let me give you a very good example. Somebody wrote in a news bulletin, I was still casting the news on TV and radio at the time. He said the chairman of the NUJ appealed to the deputy governor to use her centripetal and centrifugal powers to assist the union. You see, when somebody writes that, I do not know the meaning. Centrifugal and centripetal powers. Centripetal pulls together, centrifugal pulls apart. So how is someone going to use such opposing forces and powers
to help
anybody?
Yeah.
But amazingly, a lot of newsreaders went on there to read that, particularly as it was written by the chairman of the NUJ chapter of that state.
Yes.
He worked in the broadcasting service of the state.
Yes.
So as a news person, he wrote that and people read it. It doesn't have any meaning. It's sheer bombast. Bombast are usually committed by those who want to impress.
Yes.
And my belief, my attitude, my advocacy is that don't write to impress. Write to communicate.
And write to help people to understand.
And the key to doing that is lucidity and fluidity. If you are lucid and you are fluid, then you're communicating. And communicating means sharing meaning with your audience.
So let's talk about poetic license, because a lot of times writers who, whether you're writing poetry or certain kinds of prose, you want to also be able to impress, like you said it, and so you want to break some rules. So how do you ensure that there's a balance in breaking rules?
Yes.
And also still ensuring that you're communicating?
There is poetic license, there's creative license. People even talk of their own styles. Some people will write balderdash and they tell you, hey,
it's my style.
It is my style.
Yes.
But the truth is, your style is your own way of manipulating the rules of the language. If you go outside the rules, even when you are trying to be creative and poetic, it's not going to go. Okay, there is a particular phraseology I use, particularly in relation to this book when I talk about this book. I say, this book contains little matters that matter.
Yes.
It contains little matters that matter. I always say, even permitted, that tautology. That is tautological, the use of matter, two matters, in the same construction.
Yes.
That is tautological. But that is creative license. It is permitted. But if you look at that, the structure of that sentence, the book contains little matters that matter. You will see that it obeys all other grammatical rules, particularly subject-verb agreement.
Yes.
Little matters that matter. You cannot say little matters that matters and still say it is your style.
Exactly.
So your style, whether you're going poetic, whether you're going creative, is your own way of manipulating the language, the rules of the language, for your own purpose.
All right, so let's talk about a number of other things. I mean, you talked about malapropism,
yes,
faulty parallelism, and a lot of other, there are common mistakes and, or common errors that, people walk in without knowing. And so it takes a while to actually come around to understand. So at the end of the day, what do you hope to achieve if an editor or a journalist picks up this book?
What I want to achieve is when to help eliminate barriers to correct usage, elegant writing, and effective communication. In fact, that is the major purpose of this book.
I like that.
It's all about communicating. Everything written there is from the perspective of a communicator. It's not just English grammar. In fact, it's not a grammar book. You can say it's applied grammar because it uses a lot of grammatical terms and principles there. Yeah. But it nowhere says a noun is so, a verb is that and that. That is left for the grammarians to sort out.
And the students as well.
And the students to sort
pass
out.
An exam, yes.
So, but it is about communicating effectively. So if you can avoid these barriers, your usage, your diction, the choice of your words and all that will get better. And then you write more elegantly. I believe that writing should be elegant. All right. Because if writing is not elegant, it's difficult to read. Yeah. And most people don't want to read anyway. Look at malapropism, for instance. It's a very, very serious problem with writers also, apart from redundancy, which we've spoken so much about. Well, because let me go ahead. Because certain words, for instance, can have several meanings. So you must be very precise about what version, which sense of the word you're using. If you say, for instance, gold, You bring me a meal and I say this meal is good. Do I mean delicious? Do I mean satisfying? I could mean so many other things. Or take the verb walk. Walk, W-A-L-K. You could shuffle, you could pace, you could waddle. All these are various forms of walking. When a pregnant woman moves into the maternity ward, she waddles. Waddling is moving from side, you see the tummy. If you use that, anybody reading it will know that this writer knows what he's talking about.
So we'll have to round off here. I mean,
Okay,
this is an amazing book, Pop Errors in English, Writers Beware, for writers by Mr. Segun Omolayo. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
And hopefully writers, journalists can pick up a copy of this book.